What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The Celestial Compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Biehl. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Biehl.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to Celestial Compass. I'm Kathy Biehl of EmpowermentUnlimited.net, and welcome to 2023. Let's look briefly at what's going on this month before we get to the meat of the show. This month and this year start with two inner planets retrograde, Mercury and Mars. It's kind of like a double whammy, but it's kind of like canceling each other out. There are a number of ways of looking at this. Mercury is retrograde until the 18th. Mars has been retrograde since about Halloween in the sign that Mercury rules, Gemini, until January 12th. So there may be a sensation early in the month of just getting a lot of old information, running down rabbit holes, finding out things that you thought you had fixed that you hadn't. Could be a bunch of breakdowns because Mars does rule mechanical objects or things with moving parts. But there's a great usefulness in all of this, and you could have opportunities to talk through old understandings and clear up misunderstandings, find out where you were making an assumption that's different from somebody else in a situation. And we'll get to revisit a number of things that come to light during this time period at the end of the year. Just put a little pin in that. And I've got my survival guide for Mercury retrograde up at OMTimes. We'll tell you a lot more about that. The year isn't going to feel like it's really starting until about 2/3 of the way through the month, but doesn't mean it's going to be boring. If you feel like you want to spend more time on the couch and you're not done with the holidays, don't worry about it. That's absolutely appropriate. And in the meantime, socializing takes on a livelier and less intense mode than it's had lately because Venus today on January 2nd has moved into the friend zone, Aquarius, and this inspires all of us to hang out with a bunch of people, to look at our relationships as more like pals and buddies and not wanting to talk about deep stuff like we've been talking about. Not wanting to have deep encounters, but keeping the car running in the driveway. It's definitely breathing room time for most of the rest of the month. And at the end of the month, we'll all be dressing like Stevie Nicks, but that's another story, and we'll get into that in 2 weeks. In the meantime, today, I am very pleased to introduce to you astrologer Allison Scott of Conjuring the Muse. She is dedicated to helping people unlock the wisdom of their birth charts so they can express their true selves. She specializes in astrology readings specifically tailored for creatives to help them reflect on what they are here to manifest. She uses the power of astrology to help people identify their unique purpose and calling in life and to help them bring that into fruition. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Now, I'm curious, can you tell us how you came to astrology? That's always an interesting thing to explore with people.
Yeah, we all have our own paths to it. I was always interested, even from a young age, in astrology, but it was probably in my early 20s, someone gave me a copy of Linda Goodman's Love Signs, actually. And when I was reading through that, I was like, oh, there's more to astrology than a horoscopic soundbite. But it wasn't until after my Saturn return, when I was asking, what does it all mean, that I got into astrology for self-reflection and to really understand and unpack who I am, which quickly became an obsession. Learning, and I think that happens for us once you really understand, oh, there's more than sun signs, then the obsession kicks in, and I became quite ravenous for astrological knowledge.
I find it so funny that Linda Goodman is such a universal gateway drug for so many people, even in different generations. So that's hysterical. So how do you use it now? What's the approach that you take? I noticed in your, well, I'm jumping the gun here. What's the approach you tend to take?
Sure. So I think what really got me into being a professional astrologer and moved me from just being an avid obsessive about it was that I realized a lot of the questions that I was doing in, consultations, readings for friends and friends of friends, a lot of those questions were similar to the questions that I would deal with in my day job. I'm a book editor, an academic book editor, and I have been for 15 years. And authors often come to me and they'll say, what do you want me to write? Like, I have all of this experience. I don't know what to do with it. Can you help me hone in on what I should be doing? And I always turn that around and say, what are you actually passionate about? What is it that you want to be known for? Like, where do you want to go with this? What do you want to be known for? What do you think you'll be passionate about 5 years from now? And with clients in astrology, they're often asking, they're looking for answers about what they should be doing in life, what profession they should be in. And I find myself also asking, what are you passionate about? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And I find that astrology and analyzing the birth chart gives us a language and a structure for self-reflection so that we can understand who we are, what energizes us, what propels us, and what is not us, and what are the stories and narratives that we've been indoctrinated into. And astrology and working with an astrologer can help you to parse that out. And I find that really exciting and generative. So that's what kind of was an aha moment, that maybe I have something to offer as an astrologer as well. So that's kind of the approach.
So you are an author, and your book is Decoding the Stars, a modern astrology guide to discover your life's purpose. What inspired that book? Because it sounds like it grows right out of what you're saying your approach with your clients is.
Yeah. And when I think about what I write on the blogs on my website or for social media, a lot of times I'm trying to talk about transiting astrology or what might be inspiring to someone to continue on their creative journey or their journey of self-expression, authentic self-expression. So with this book, it was about what is the foundational understanding that someone who has, no familiarity with astrology, maybe beyond sun signs, or maybe they know a little bit about their sun, moon, and rising, but they don't really understand houses. Like, if someone has very limited astrological knowledge, but they want to start diving in and really see what power it has for that self-reflection and for understanding life purpose, that seems like the core of my message. So it was an easy step to translate that into the book.
So what you want your reader to be able to do is, it sounds to me like there are a number of pieces to it, understand some of their fundamental wiring, but also translate that or transfer it to what someone could do on the career front. Is that an accurate reflection?
Yeah, exactly. I think that I wanted to provide a resource that would ask the questions to help people get from self-knowledge. Like, if you understand your sun sign, that might not necessarily if you just read the descriptors, that's not going to help you figure out necessarily what profession might be a good fit for that. And so this book speaks directly to that and provides reflection questions and activities to help guide that to the end of helping the reader figure out, what professional work will feel most fulfilling.
You focus on three major placements in the planetary placements, or the luminaries and an angle, I guess, is a better way of putting it. So you say that the sun, the ascendant, and the moon, and you say the sun is the essential nature. And what I find helpful, and what distinguishes this from a lot that's already on the market, is you don't merely look at the sun in the signs, but also in the house placements.
Yeah.
What inspired you to do that?
Yeah. Yes. It is challenging to, once I got into doing consultations, it's very difficult for me to have, I think, meaningful conversations or to talk generally about astrology anymore. I want to talk about the sun sign, but I want to talk about the house placement. There's so much information in the planets and luminaries and points, the placement in houses. And that provides essential information that's difficult to get in a horoscope. It's difficult to get at unless you have a consultation with an astrologer. So I thought, there's some information that I can put together here to walk people through, how can I interpret my chart for my essential nature, my profession, and my purpose. And that just requires that we talk about the house placements.
And I see that there's language that you have already used in our conversation that you pose to your clients that shows up in the book. So for each sign, you actually identify where you feel the most passionate and in flow, and when you feel the most drained or unfulfilled, which I think is a really valuable way of looking at things.
Yeah, I feel as something that makes me very happy about the book. I'm happy with the total sum of it, but I think any author knows that there's certain aspects where you're like, I think I really am excited for people to read this, and I feel that about the moon part, because I think a lot of discussion about the moon is about emotional dysregulation or what makes you moody, and people rarely talk about, at least in my experience, what I've read and witnessed is people rarely talk about the moon and its house placement as to where you get emotional fulfillment, and also what might emotionally drain you and how that might transfer into decisions you might make about what workplace is. Like, do you need to be working from home? Do you need to be working with people? What makes you feel stabilized? And I think that the moon gives us a lot of information about that. And also, similarly, the rising sign and the sun sign, looking at those placements and the information that they give us, both in a positive aspect, like you said, like what are we passionate about, but also what might we not be passionate about if this is our sun placement,
And maybe by putting it in terms of most drained or unfulfilled, that's a way to get the reader's attention to reframe how they're going about things and go, yeah, that is a drag always for me. Maybe it's not my fault. Maybe I'm just doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, I love you saying that, because I would hope that through this self-reflection that readers might be kinder to themselves and might beat themselves up a little less for their nature and what they have natural acumen for, and where they might need to seek support or structure outside of themselves because they don't have any placements in Earth, or that's just not what they're here to do and who they're here to be. And I'm speaking quite vaguely, but again, astrology kind of requires some specificity, and I think that the book gets at that.
it's like, in a sense, you're giving people permission to, well, permission to be who they are. But a sub or related, a tangent to this is there's a lot of descriptions of sun sign stuff or any placement in a particular sign that tends to get pedagogical or methodological or judgmental, I guess is a better word for it. Especially people who have a lot of Virgo placements can be brought up thinking like they're the biggest stick in the muds on the earth. They're very useful. I like Virgos, but actually I like something about all the signs. But there's a like a stereotyping that has sometimes prevailed in the descriptions of things. So it sounds like you have actually taken what you've experienced with your client base and translated it into something that readers can, I don't know, react to, see, oh, look, this is really the way I'm supposed to be. This isn't bad, and take some of the judgment out of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, something that I hope stands out in the introduction to sort of when, or anyone listening to this, like, if there is a description for your sun placements, for Virgo, and you're like, that does not resonate with me. And we'll hear this from naysayers about astrology all the time. They're like, I'm not like that. It's like, there are a lot of significations for each sign and for each house. And not all of them can resonate with each individual. You're not your sun sign, you're your whole birth chart. And it's a difficult task, really, to synthesize all of the disparate elements of your chart into a cohesive narrative about who you are. And
with that, unfortunately, I'm going to we're going to put the pause button down right here, take our first break, and we will start up again with this very shortly. So hang in there, everybody.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. Today, we're talking with Allison Scott, author of Decoding the Stars, a modern astrology guide to discover your life's purpose. And just before the break, Allison, you were musing about the complication of that we are so much more than just a couple of disparate parts of our chart, and that there's a challenge in synthesizing all of the different astrological components that make up our personality.
Yeah, and that I hope that a goal of this book, in part for helping people understand or get inspired when they read about their sun or their moon or their rising sign, to say, oh, this is who I am, or maybe, yeah, this is what I'm not good at or not passionate about, or that is exhausting for me, to kind of understand both sides of that this will also help them to unpack the complexity of the interactions of different aspects of their nature. And the final chapter in the book, Calibration, does seek to help the lay reader understand the complexity of that balance that professional astrologers have to do when we're looking at a full birth chart, but to give some tools so that the reader can feel empowered to, really decode their own chart.
I want to talk a little bit about the approach that you take with the ascendant. Frequently, people look at this as identity or appearance, but you look at it as what motivates you, which is working from the natural house ruler being Mars. Am I guessing right here?
No, actually.
No.
So,
Okay.
the idea about the rising sign speaking to motivation in the chart is an idea that comes from Hellenistic astrology, which is experiencing a revival since the 1990s. Hellenistic astrology, for those unfamiliar, is the astrology created by the Greek-speaking world in the 1st century BCE, which is the foundation of all Western astrology. And a lot of texts from that time have been reclaimed and retranslated since the 1990s and reintroduced some of these more ancient concepts. And one of those is that the rising sign in the first house is the helm of the ship, which is the birth chart. And that the rising sign ruler is the helmsman, which directs us. And so that's why the placement of the rising sign ruler, the house placement of the rising sign ruler, speaks to sort of where your life is being directed, being steered. So this idea of, the first house is a sense of identity. It just as the sun, the core essence, is also related to identity. And again, the whole chart speaks to your identity. But that there's something about that idea of core identity that speaks to your motivation and what gets you up in the morning. The sign of that was coming up over the eastern horizon at the moment you took your first breath is what enlivened you. And so I think it's trying to balance, or we're talking about the motivation of the rising sign, adds a nuance and extension of what people often conflate solely with the sun sign.
Right.
Mm.
And you use traditional rulerships because it comes out of the
Hellenistic astrology, that's correct, yeah.
And that means that there are some planets that will rule more than one house.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So can you elaborate a little bit more on how you would pull the house placement of the ruler into, how would you, it's not just the sign, the expression of the sign on the ascendant, but also you meld in where the helmsman is, and would you look also at what sign the ruling planet is in and how that works?
Sure. I think that would be additional layers that aren't covered in the book, because that's always the nuance of, what is the condition of the ruler of a house, like in any reading of any house. But for the rising sign ruler, this helmsman, if you are, for example, a Virgo rising, and so Mercury rules Virgo, we're looking at where Mercury is in the chart. And this isn't that different from the way that maybe modern astrologers might look at like the ruler of the chart. I believe. This you would look to the house placements. Let's say that Mercury, in this case, is placed in the ninth house. So the reading of your life purpose is going to need to incorporate the topics covered in the ninth house. So we might assume study, long distance travel, speaking, publishing, philosophy, spiritual tradition, or being a teacher. Not all of those things necessarily, but something about those ninth house topics will need to be calculated in when considering the life purpose.
And then, so we've talked a little bit about the sun, we've talked a little bit about the ascendant, and then there is how you actually feel about things. We've talked a tiny bit about the emotional nature. So how would you relate someone's moon sign to their life purpose?
Yeah, so again, that idea that with life purpose, what one of the things we're striving for is a sense of fulfillment, of being in flow, and the moon is going to give us information about how we can feel emotionally fulfilled. So looking at the sign, that'll tell us some of the topics and activities that will make us feel fulfilled. For example, if you have your moon in Capricorn, you might find that setting goals and achievement is going to be particularly emotionally fulfilling. And that's true even if your sun is in Pisces. But if you had only read sun in Pisces, you might think, that structure is not aligned to your life purpose. So I think it's one of those elements that helps us see, what makes me feel safe, supported, so that I can do my great work in the world, and that emotional regulation and that sense of safety and security is spoken about by the moon sign. And then looking at the house placement of the moon, that also will give us topics as to the activities that can bring us back into emotional security, and then maybe also like a sense of dysregulation. For example, if you have the moon in the fifth house, you might find emotional fulfillment with your children or with your creative work, or with fun, I guess, generally. The fifth house is a great house. So thinking about the style of your moon sign and the topics of the house, what can that tell you about what makes you feel emotionally safe, secure, and happy, and then therefore fulfilled? And how can you bring that into your professional work?
And so you have strategies that you suggest for each moon sign.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And then a worksheet. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Yes, and I would say, and then reflection questions. So the worksheet at the end of each part that helps you to walk through. It gives you questions that guide you to think about past experiences through the lens of your moon sign and house in this case. When has this been true for you, and how did you feel at those times, and how are you feeling right now, and how does this relate to your professional work? And it sort of helps you think through, okay, now that I have these ideas about the archetypal imagery of the moon sign and the topics of the house, but like, how do I really bring that into my personal experience and what I have experienced in the past, and what I can, try to craft for myself in the future.
And are these worksheets something that kind of like grow out of the way that you handle things for clients? This is an approach you take with people? Or did you dream this up for the book?
No, definitely these are questions that came up organically in consultation, and have been refined through those conversations.
And then towards the back of the book, there is a section that, again, takes an approach that veers from the norm and is innovative and adds something to the conversation, and that is looking at the second, sixth, and 10th houses as houses of substance. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so when we think about, especially because this book is focusing on life purpose through the lens of professional work, acknowledging that much of our life purpose is outside of our profession in terms of our relationships and unpaid work and hobbies, but that this book's goal is to help the reader find meaningful work. I feel it's imperative that we talk about the second, sixth, and 10th houses because those are the houses that contain our money, our assets, how we live out our day-to-day work, and and speak to the portfolio that is our career and our life's work. So, yeah, I really wanted to dig into that.
And you separate them by element.
Yeah, so again, this is an outgrowth of the fact that I am a Hellenistic astrologer, or I work from that tradition. So the house system that I use is whole sign houses, and as opposed to Placidus, which I believe is the most common. But the readings for each house are you could read the ones for your element and for your sign. If you do use Placidus, they're still valid. But one of the reasons that I like using whole sign houses and that the Hellenistic tradition resonates with me is because these triplicities, like the second, sixth, and 10th houses that have to deal with work, are in the same element by whole sign houses. And I think that there's just something really potent when you think, yes, that my career and that which deals with this monetary 3D world that I have to live and express through is in the same style of the same element. And I hope that readers will also find that really generative as they reflect on their work.
For the casual astrology fans who may be listening to this, can you give a short form explanation of whole sign houses?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just start by saying the birth chart is broken up into 12 houses, and what designates the first house is always the ascendant point, which is the point of the eastern horizon at the moment that you were born. It's the point of the zodiacal sign that was rising over. So let's say you were born at a certain time and Taurus is rising over the eastern horizon. The eastern horizon, if carried out into space, would be hitting, a certain degree of Taurus. And so your ascendant point might be 10 degrees of Taurus. In that case, then the first in whole sign houses, the whole first house is Taurus. That is not the case in other house systems. Placidus, for example, would say that the first house begins on the cusp, right? Like on the ascendant point.
Point, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. But whole sign houses, as the name implies, each house is wholly occupied by a whole sign, following the order of the ascendant sign. So the first house in this example that I'm giving would be Taurus, and then the second house would be Gemini, the third house, Cancer, and so forth and so on through all the 12 houses. And this was the house system that was used, when Hellenistic astrology kind of coalesced, in the ancient Greek-speaking world in the first century BCE.
And I have not thought about the second, sixth, and 10th houses as a collective. And I find this very, very, very interesting because I've got fire on those houses. Whole sign or Placidus, they're fire. And I bore easily. I think this explains people's different attitudes and viewpoints and approaches. And again, if you've got Earth in these on these houses, that's great. But otherwise, somebody might pass judgment on you for choices that you make or things that you're attracted to. It seems to me.
Right. You might be judging yourself for the ways that if you have air for your houses of substance and you like a really eclectic and, I don't know, like you have done a lot of different jobs and you have a very like maybe Gemini quality or very cerebral approach to like your work life, but that doesn't necessarily vibe with your sun sign and your moon sign. It could speak to why you'd have a disconnect with your professional life.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
Mm.
Excellent point. Well, now everyone's going to have to go look up their charts and also use the workbook at the back. So so at this point, with this information, then this would be something that the reader would then put into the calibration section of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, so that you would consider the main idea behind the calibration portion is just that most people have, some people have a pretty even distribution of planets and points throughout their chart, but a lot of us feel a sense of concentration. For example, my chart is primarily earth and air. I don't have a ton of fire, but I do have important fire placements. But that when you look at the weighting, like if you are mostly earth and air, you might have difficulty starting new endeavors, or you might have a difficulty with the relational aspects, or the emotional, rather like intuitive aspects of life. And then more especially, like just thinking about the houses of substance, if you don't have any planets or luminaries, you have no placements in your houses of substance, you might feel quite a disconnect from your professional life, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't have one, because most of us do have to work for a living. So how do you grapple with that? And that chapter kind of helps you create a narrative of your chart.
We will expand on that after the break, so hang in, everybody.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking today with Allison Scott, author of the just released, or will be tomorrow, book Decoding the Stars, a modern astrology guide to discover your life's purpose. And before the break, we were talking about calibrating your chart and analyzing the differing weight that various aspects, placements, features of your chart have. I had cut you off. Is there more you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that the chapter about calibration helps you to think about the elemental balance of your chart. So the elemental weight, as you said there. For example, if you have mostly earth and air, what are like the sort of superpowers imbued to you because of that? And then what are the challenges that you might face because of the weight of those in your personality, in your nature? And then also thinking about how that weight might affect your professional life by seeing whether or not you have placements in the 2nd, 6th, and 10th houses. Again, these houses of substance that correlate to your professional life or how you deal with money and the skills with which you make money.
And just to clarify to the occasional listener here, some people will look at their chart and they'll see that there are houses that are empty. Okay. And they flip out and go, that's never going to happen in my life. Like you have a 2nd house ruling your money, empty, no planets. 7th house seems to really set people off. Oh my God, I'll never get married. But there is energy. There's something going on in that house, even if there isn't a planet or a luminary in it. Obviously, right? That's what you're saying here. Yeah, absolutely. So we are all, again, our whole chart, we're all 12 houses, and we are all 12 signs. We have a different weighting, but the houses are supposed to encapsulate the topics of life that we all encounter. And so one of the ways to look at that, even if you don't have a placement in a house like the house of relationships, you're still going to be affected by transiting astrology. So that's an important thing to consider. The planets, luminaries, asteroids, etc., they are moving through the signs and therefore will move through that house and activate that for you. There are other timing techniques as well, which is probably a little outside the scope, but that, it's even though you don't have a placement there, that sign is going to give you information about your style of relating to the topics of that house. For example, the 7th house and relationships or interactions with, committed partners. And it's still worthwhile to understand. It doesn't mean that you won't have relationships, or if you don't have placements in the 2nd, 6th, and 10th house, it certainly doesn't mean that you won't have a profession or, interact with capitalism, here. So I can't really avoid that. I love your concept of elemental superpowers. Talk about reframing for the positive.
Yeah, I mean, I am a Libra sun, so maybe I see both sides, and I like the idea of balance. But there are always going to be gifts, and challenges to any placement or any element. And I think that it can be very empowering to embrace the strengths that are innate to us, even if they're not strengths that society necessarily promotes. For example, water is known for intuitive powers, like that intuitive superpower, that feeling other people's emotions or being tapped into that collective energy and through intuition. And is that something necessarily that's valued by society writ large right now? Perhaps not, but it is a superpower. How can you bring that? How can you claim that and feel empowered by that? And then also to look at the things that might be difficult for you because of your weight in one or more elements, and to, be able to see yourself in that, to give yourself some compassion for your nature and say, okay, if I am if you are a lot of air and fire and you have very few placements in earth, maybe you need to seek help outside yourself to provide structure and containers for you to be your most successful. And that isn't a weakness. It's just not something that you maybe necessarily have within yourself to provide to yourself.
So
just as an example.
Maximizing your strengths and figuring workarounds for the weaknesses.
Yeah. Yes.
Oddly, what it made me think of, when I was studying for the bar exam, we were taught to just go overboard on the topics that we really understood so we could maximize the number of correct answers we got in that, and to put a lot less time in the stuff that we were having trouble with, because that was not the point when we were going to master it. So that's kind of a parallel to this, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of an overall message of the book. When you think about your professional life, there are some things that come easily to you, and this doesn't mean that people can't. It doesn't mean people without a lot of earth placements can't develop acumen with, spreadsheets, but you don't have to have, your sun in Virgo in order to be able to be detail oriented, but that you have natural gifts and proclivities. So how can you maximize those? Because they also make you feel most in flow, because that's what you're here to do. And so how can you maximize, in your professional life or your personal life, your true nature, and how can you acknowledge gaps maybe, or we could say just parts of your job or your life that don't resonate with your true nature, and how can you minimize those? And that's what I think a big message of the book is how can you see yourself more clearly and then make intentional choices and live a more joyful life in flow, because you can maximize what you're good at and minimize what challenges you.
It seems to me this book would be really ideal for someone trying to grappling with why they're unhappy on the job, or maybe a college student who's trying to figure out the path to take, or someone in their early 20s who's floundering and trying this and that and not really hitting on. It seems like it's like a self-help form of vocational counseling, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that there are many crossroads in our life where we have to, stop and reassess. And tools like this book can help that. I've certainly done readings with individuals in their 60s, and we're still talking about the same topics. And I think it's because there, in part, is a sense of rebirth that we feel throughout our life as certain aspects of, certain seasons of our life come to an end, and then we feel reborn. And we have to get to know who we are now and who we've become. I think the most obvious audiences certainly would be people just getting into their career, people in college. But I think too, and this was true for me, that if you're finishing your Saturn return, so if you're around 30 and you're thinking, what did I do in my 20s? I hate my job and I don't know what I'm doing. And again, these sorts of moments of crises can happen at any age, but that this book can help, I hope, provide be a partner on that journey for the reader to discover who they are and what could make them feel really happy and fulfilled professionally.
I'm thinking the Uranus opposition would be another really ideal time when many people just play fruit basket turnover with their lives, what's commonly called midlife crisis. Something doesn't feel right, so I'm just going to start blowing things up. This might be a more controlled demolition approach to life.
Yes. And I hope that this book also will help people feel a little less stressed, because there's this, when you feel very uncomfortable in your situation, like your romantic situation or your professional situation, it starts pushing you to be like, I just can't feel this pain anymore. Makes you make kind of rash Uranian type decisions with your life sometimes. And maybe that is what your life needs. I'm, not saying that people shouldn't make major changes if that's appropriate for them, but that, like, something that I found when I did this work with myself was it helped me to see what in my career was chafing me, and what and why, like what I really resonated with and why I really resonated with it, what aspects of my job. And then I started focusing more on those, and at least just caring less about the stuff that was chafing me because it doesn't resonate with my true nature. And I was able to find some peace without making a major career change. And I think it's led to opening up other doors and other opportunities and synchronicities because I had that self-knowledge. So I hope that for readers as well, like that reading this book doesn't mean you're going to immediately change careers. It could just help you find peace where you're at.
And understanding yourself better and what drives you, that's always valuable, no matter what the arena is or the framework is that you're approaching it from, seems to me. I mean, that's a lot of, we're all just trying to make sense of ourselves and other people, but ourselves mostly. My perspective.
No, exactly. And I love being a thought partner for people going through that journey. And I think being an astrologer is such a gift to the astrologer as well, that I get to witness people going through this hard work of self-introspection and then change based on that introspection. And there's just a lot of different ways to do that, a lot of different self-help avenues. And I think you need to find the one that resonates with you. I would say, as an astrologer, that it's because of your chart that this or that, resonates with you. But for those that, like this conversation, who are like, oh yeah, that does resonate with me, then I think that this book might be a tool, a partner for you for that self-reflection.
And again, everyone, the book is called Decoding the Stars, a Modern Astrology Guide to Discover Your Life's Purpose, and it's put out by Quarto and is absolutely gorgeous. If you're really into astrological graphics, you will salivate over this book. It is utterly gorgeous. So I congratulate you on this. Allison, please tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, conjuringthemuse.com, or on Instagram at conjuringthemuse. I'd love to chat. Come find me.
Do you have any other, now that you're done with this book, do you have any other projects coming up?
Mostly napping after writing the book. It was an experience. I am a book editor, but actually being the author this time required a lot of caffeine and Oreos in my case, and late nights. So I do have some ideas, but I want to do some more, field research and consultation to gather a bit more data about what I want to say. I am excited to hopefully write more in this vein down the line.
Well, I'm curious to see what you come up with, and anything that, and keeping alive the Hellenistic dredging up that started in the 90s. I witnessed some of the beginning of that with the three Roberts, the astrologers named Robert, who were spearheading this. I have a big pile of cassette tapes from lectures that tells you how long ago this happened. At any rate, thank you so much for coming to us on the eve of your book release. And it's like this is a big, widely available publisher, so listeners, you should not have any difficulty getting your hands on this. So I wish you great success with this.
Thanks
and I'm
so
really
much.
glad that you talked with us.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
And everybody, don't go nuts this year. It's going to be a very different year than last. You'll find my forecasts at OMTimes.com. I've got them up for the month, and my Mercury retrograde guide is there. And I'm also leading a Write Your Own Adventure workshop for 2023 with advice and a beautiful workbook of how to deal with it all. And this is on the top page of my site, empowermentunlimited.net. I'm leading that with Donna Woodwell, who is a frequent guest on this show. And any of you who've had anything to do with her know that she is a Virgo, that the workbook is phenomenal. And we have way too much fire and Gemini between us, so we'll be laughing quite a bit. At any rate, everyone be safe, and thank you again, Allison. I hope that the fact that this came out during this dual retrograde means that you have a slow rolling and long playing launch that will take you many, many wonderful places.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks with some more New Year's predictions. Bye now.